Hey everybody, it's Steve Parsons Barbecue. Thanks for tuning in. I've washed off my pork back ribs. I've patted them down, get rid of all the bacteria. I like to take off the membrane of mine. A lot of people do. The way I typically do this is just by using a butter knife. I like to get under the membrane, typically around the middle. And this is pretty easy. Get in there, get your paper towel in there. Paper towel's your best friend at this point. And if you're lucky, it'll all come off in one shot. Doesn't always go that way, but with a little bit of practice, and if the membrane wasn't scored when you first got it, you should be able to do it. Boom, just like that. So one done. Now let's do the other. Okay, so on to the second rack of ribs. We're gonna just repeat the same exact process. Mr. Butter Knife and Mr. Paper Towel are your friends at this point, so let's get that membrane off. One of the things I like to look for at this point too is if there's any big fatty deposits or anything like that. Definitely get rid of them. Get them off of there. Your rub will not adhere to that. It will not render properly, so just get rid of it. Another thing you want to look for is shards on the edges or on the ends of your ribs. Remember, you're feeding yourself and other people, so safety first. Just like one glove off when you're using it to handle your binders and your rubs. In this case, I'm using sriracha today. I use a lot of things. I use mustard, Worcester, you name it. I'm not too much into the oil-based binders like olive oil, but the world's your oyster. I've used both. Lately, I've been using a lot of Cosmo Q's for rubs. Again, I make a lot of my rubs as well, so it's up to you what you want to use at this point. The world is your oyster. It's barbecue, man, so just whatever your taste is. Just make sure you hit up the bottoms, the sides, the edges. Everything's going to get cooked, so make sure you pat it in versus rub it in. Again, if there's any other scraggly parts or silver skin or anything like that, just get rid of it. It's not good to your cook. So at this point, just repeat the process. Hit it up with your binder. You don't have to go too heavy on it, just enough for your rub to tack onto it, okay, at this point. Also at this point, I have my smoker preheating at 250. So basically, I'm going to be letting these ribs sit for roughly about 30 minutes before I put it on. I don't go any more than an hour. Make sure you pat it in nice. So other than that, I'm excited to get this cook going on. And I forgot. Pepper. I love to add pepper. I think it adds another good element. I love pepper on a lot of things, and there's one other element I like to use is celery seed. I use this on winter ribs in the oven all the time, and it brings a nice dynamic of flavor. So we will see you out at the smoker. Okay, so today I'm using the Jim Boy Green Mountain Grills pellet smoker. I'm at 250 already. That's my go-to a lot of the times for ribs. I'm using an apple and cherry mix. I like fruit wood as it pertains to pork. I think the sweeter the better. Everything's been sitting for roughly about 30 minutes. I don't go longer than 30 minutes or an hour. It is a very thin cut of meat. You don't want to overpower it. You want the meat to be the star of the show, not the rub. So I'm going to be closing the lid, and I'm not going to be looking at this puppy for another 2 hours at least. See you soon. Okay, so it's been just a little over 2 hours, so let's see what we're working with here. Oh, hello. These guys are looking good. The color is starting to become a nice mahogany color. Is exactly what I'm shooting for. So I'm hitting it up with the spritz right now, which is 3/4 white grape juice and 1/4 apple cider. Use whatever you like. I've used other things as well, like just apple cider or apple cider vinegar, water, whatever you like. I'm trying a different method this time. I read it on a World Championship barbecue team who won in ribs. So what I'm doing at this point is I'm flipping them meat side down. I'm going to continue this process for about 45 minutes to an hour. I'm going to hit them up on the back again with the spritz. I want to make sure they're nice and moist and tender. And I'm going to be closing the lid, and I will be checking this out in a little bit. Okay, so we've been smoking now meat side down for roughly about an hour, and now it's time for the wrap. And look at those guys, look at the color on them. They're definitely ready for this part. So I'm going to be using a little bit of light brown sugar as a base layer. You can use whatever you want. I've used tons of different things before. I've used agave nectar, honey, butter, you name it, Frank's Hot, barbecue. For this application, this is what we're doing today. I'm going to be melting some butter. I'm going to be going with about 3/4 cup. I'm going to be adding to that about 2 tablespoons of the rub I've been using. And I'm going to get that melted up. So once that's melted up, we're going to put it all together and go from there. Okay, so now it's time to put it all together. I got my brown sugar. Now it's time to put a little bit of rub down. I got my melted butter. Boom, it's going down. Meat side down with the ribs. And it's simple as just repeating the process on the back side of the ribs. A little bit of brown sugar, a little bit of your rub, and of course, a little bit of the melted butter. Now, you're going to want to wrap this as tight as possible and be careful about bones poking through or anything like that. Try to eliminate as much air as possible. And I always like to double wrap my ribs just in case. I want to ensure I get a good cook. No breakthroughs on the foil or anything like that, because that will compromise your cook. I have the oven going at this point at 250. I'm going to finish this portion off in the oven because there's no sense in wasting pellets and fuel, because all I'm using is heat, and I got enough of the smoke I need on the ribs right now. So boom, here we go, and they're ready for the oven. Okay, so now I got them out of the oven. No sense in wasting fuel at this point. I've been using a pellet grill. Times are a little bit tough right now, so use your heat however you can. In this case, I already got enough smoke on them. I know what I'm gonna do, so I've had them in the oven now for 2 hours at 250. So I'm just gonna open them up. I've already have my glaze warmed and ready to go. So at this point, look at all that butter. Unbelievable. So what you want to do at this point is, when you're doing ribs, it's all about feel. And that just fell right off. That's the wave test right there. When it waves at you, you know it's ready. So what I'm gonna do on both of these is I'm gonna glaze the back end of this, the front end. It's gonna go back on the smoker with this glaze. I'm gonna let it set up. I'm gonna let it tack for roughly about 15 minutes, maybe 20. So just get a light coating on the bottom. You don't need to go too heavy on the bottom, because ultimately it is the bottom. Flip it on the top, same thing. Get a nice layer coat going. Just like that. Now, one of the things I like to do at this point, before it going back on the smoker, is remember that barbecue rub that you used before? Well, we're gonna give it another shot of that. Just a light shot, you don't wanna go too heavy on it. In this case, one of my favorites, Cosmos. Just a light tack up. Some do it on the bottom as well, but that's personal preference. Other than that, I'm gonna go put it on the smoker, let it tack up. So while my ribs were in the oven, I was able to do some chicken thighs for the last couple hours. I've already basted the ribs once, 15 minutes, and it's time to do it again. Okay, so now it's time to give these guys one last baste, and off the grill they go. The chicken I'm gonna deal with here pretty shortly. Okay, so they are. After basting last time, they're back on the smoker, 250. Meat side up, and my glaze that I put on that I showed you earlier. Basically put the first batch of glaze on for 15 minutes. Came back after about 15-20, put another one on. Off the grill, and now it's at the point where it's cutting time, man. So basically had about overall 30 minutes of glazing time. Let it set now here on the table for about 10 minutes. So now it's time to cut into it. So let's do that. Dalstrong knives are really nice knives, by the way. I just wanted to say that. This is like butter. It doesn't even want to cut proper. There you go. That's the end result. I also want to mention that I put a little bit of a glaze on it just about 5 minutes before taking it off the grill. Now I'll tell you my little secret. I mixed this with a little bit of barbecue, and that created a nice glaze. So there we go. Nice smoke ring. This is falling apart, so this is gonna be deadly. I'm making chicken right now too, but we'll get into that in another video. So if you liked what you saw, please hit subscribe. Steve Parsons Barbecue. Take care, y'all.